Gentlemen, I got some questions all over the place. I'm going to go in no particular order, although I'm going to try and start with you, Director Woods. You heard Commissioner Kemp talk about his frustration at the participation rates as far as agencies using OS2 go. I hope I stated that correctly. And then you mentioned something that caught my attention regarding about 58% of purchases are made off the schedules, which I assume in this circumstance means not using the schedules.
That's correct, at retail stores.
That number surprises me. Did it surprise you that it was that high?
I personally was surprised it was that high, yes, because GSA goes to a lot of effort to make these schedules available, and they publicize the availability of schedules, and companies do a lot to sharpen their pencils to make sure that their prices are good. So that number did surprise me.
Right, because that's the whole concept here behind the schedules, is that you all negotiate on behalf of the Federal Government as a whole, try and get the best possible price for our agencies, and that our agencies take advantage of that work that you performed in order to buy products at the lowest possible price. That's the basic summation of the system, right?
That's exactly right.
And if we got 58% of purchases of office products, I guess that's office products, is that what you're talking about?
That's right, just for office products.
So they're going down the corner to Office Depot. Not that I have anything against Office Depot, but it sort of defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
That's right.
How can we help fix that? I read the rule, by the way, and it's exactly, not surprisingly, as Commissioner Kemp said, that they're encouraged to use it, but there's no requirement. How do we help fix this?
We need to make it as easy as possible for the consumer, the government agencies, to be able to make purchases using the GSA schedule.
Did you ask any of the folks why they weren't using the schedules?
Convenience, I think, is probably a fair characterization of the reason, and that's why GSA needs to make every effort to make it as simple and easy as possible for agency users to use either the schedule program or OS2. And
when you say convenience, give me a practical example. Give me a real. What does that mean? If I'm the Air Force and I want to go out and buy pens, why do they say, or again, this is a hypothetical, why would they say that it's not convenient to use the schedules, whereas it's more convenient to go down the street?
Sure. Well, delivery time is probably the best example. If a user just goes down the street, they get it today. If they order off the schedule, it's unlikely they're going to get same-day delivery.
Could pressure on them to keep their inventories down because of costs contribute to this circumstance?
That's possible. Agencies sometimes will inventory quantities of office supplies to make them available, and I know many organizations, both public and private, are cutting back on inventories in order to streamline operations.
Thank you, Director Woods. Commissioner Kemp, a couple different questions for you. Let me see what I find. We've got some numbers about some of the set-asides, which 6 months ago were at 0, and in the last 2 months have actually picked up considerably, looking to like 14.8%. Are you concerned that implementing DBEM right now may negatively impact that positive trend?
DBEM?
The demand-based efficiency.
Oh, demand-based. Oh, efficiency.
Did I get that wrong? DBEM. Yeah, I'm sorry. Listen,
no.
this is
okay.
Did you just ask me an alphabet soup
it's
question?
New. I didn't even recognize my own acronym. Here's what we're actually looking to do. We know that there are some schedules that we manage that have enormous numbers of people who are not getting any business. Some of them upwards of 60%. We also know on some of them that the demand is going south, and in some cases substantially, like shipping and packing schedule, photographic equipment, the people that sell typewriters. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do that's going to change that demand curve. However,
what's the harm in just leaving them there?
Well, the harm in leaving them there is it costs us money to just leave them there. Well, actually, let's separate people who are not meeting their minimum sales guarantees and the demand-based efficiency model. They're two different things.
Okay.
So demand-based efficiency model, we've looked at some schedules where we know we really don't need any more competitors. And when we've looked at that, we've looked at areas where we know there's there's substantially no innovation going on. We've looked at areas, in many of these cases, we have 400 or 500 contractors on the schedule already, One of the things we're hoping to do is just at least preserve the market for those that are already on. So people who had invested on getting on the schedule, let's not divide that market up by adding 50 more people and divide the pie up just a little bit more. And we've talked to our customers, and our customers have told us, if I've got 500 choices and I'm not really buying that much, why are you wasting your time adding more people when you could be dropping the time it takes to get on the schedules where I do have demand, where there is innovation, where I do need people. Also, they're saying to us, can you go out and do some more of this Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative? Or can you help us understand how to do Strategic Sourcing Initiative? Or for our industry partners, can you go out and train people how to use the schedule better, help them write difficult statements of work so that we can actually use GSA Schedule better, much to what Director Woods is saying. Can you make yourself easier to do business with or help us understand how to do business so you drive up the pie that's actually being spent under the schedules program? We only have limited resources in the Federal Acquisition Service, and what we're looking to do is shift some of those resources, some to help industry and drive higher sales, some to work with our agency customers and develop secondary uses of the schedule or help them understand how to use it. But in any case, what we've done was we've actually looked at, we expect that if we implement this as we're planning right now, we would only be impacting about 25% of the schedule sales. So for 75% of the schedules and 75% of the sales, and by the way, the growing part of those sales, it will be open and will continue to be open. And one other benefit to industry, it identifies the dead ends, and it also identifies the opportunities. And I think this has some value for industry, which is basically this, helping them understand where the government is not going to be buying, where it would be a waste of their time and money to come into the program. And we're not doing that right now. So we're just saying we're taking all comers. So in many ways, diluting some of the potential partners that, once they get in, and I get these calls from vendors, I just got in, I'm so excited. And I just, in some of these areas, I just know there's no business coming. And so it's helpful to them.
And I can't argue with the logic, although in this sea of paper I have on my desk now, staff just handed me something that said that the special item numbers that you all are proposing closing as part of DBEM, they represent over $8 billion in sales, or about 16% of all the GSA schedule sales. Isn't that it doesn't sound to me like it's typewriters. Really buy that many typewriters?
It's a lot of things. It's it's 2 whole schedules and parts of, I think, 14 others. But again, we selected those special item numbers or SINs based on where the government, where we've seen sales go down, where we know there's no innovation, and where we have, in many of these areas, we've looked and seen what the number of schedule holders with low or no volume sales are. And in most of these areas, it's upwards of 40%, and in many of them, upwards of 60 or 80%.
Gotcha. Before we leave DBEM, one more question. Is that the written testimony that you submitted claims that the GSA will save roughly $20 million using DBEM, but prior written materials provided by your office say that the savings have been scaled back to about $6 million. But is that apples to apples? Did something change? Tell me about the discrepancy between those two numbers.
I think the discrepancy between the two numbers had to do with when we first started this, we were looking at actually closing a lot more SINs than we ended up. So we after talking with stakeholders, with OFPP, others, we pulled that number back to a smaller number of SINs being closed. Additionally, some of the numbers actually take into account both the savings from folks being their schedules being ended due to low or no volume sales, in addition to the DBM model.
Let's transition now to the issue that Ranking Member Chu mentioned to you briefly, and that I think Mr. Allen raised during the first panel discussion regarding the use in various states of these schedules. And all I can tell you is that in our preparation for the research for this hearing, we reached out to Texas and talked to the Texas Comptroller's Office. That may have been the wrong person with whom to speak, but they said they'd never talked to anybody about GSA on this. So clearly there may be a misunderstanding at some point, and I would encourage you to reach out to both Texas and I suppose California, although you said you've spoken to them as well, because they're telling us that they anticipated that if the vendors in year 3 or later of a contract that aren't meeting the threshold were removed, it would affect nearly $25 million in state purchases, or about 15% of the Texas multiple award schedule purchases, almost all of whom are small business. I think Texas thinks there may be a problem. Texas may think that there's going to be a negative effect, a pejorative effect on small business in that state because of what's going through. So I encourage you to reach out to them if you get a chance. But it raises a question for me, which is come back to the point about why not just leave these folks on the list. I think if I could sell my $25,000 worth of stuff every single year, I think I pay you $187, $200. Why not just charge me $250 to stay on the list?
Well, we looked at a lot of different things that we could do. We looked at closing them for a while. We looked at right now we normally just look at the end of the 5-year period, and if they haven't had any sales in 5 years, we don't renew their option. We've looked at a lot of things, but it does cost us money, and actually oftentimes the non-participating schedule holders are the ones that cause us the most cost because they're not really playing. So when we have mass mods, when I say mass mods, mods that everybody needs to do, we have a process for doing that. They don't respond, so we have to hunt them down and follow through with them. So oftentimes they tend to be the ones that cause us the most. We also have contract administration duties that we have to do with all of our contract holders, whether they're making sales or not. So that they continue to, it is a costly thing for us.
I just encourage you as you go forward to consider the fact, as you know, because you know more about this than probably anybody, and certainly than I do, that there are folks who are using this not for the purpose of selling to you folks or to us, but to selling to their various states, and maybe to figure out a way to allow them to continue to do that without prejudicing their ability to deal with it.
Two things about that. We did talk to Texas, but I believe we talked to the people that actually run the Texas schedule. So there may be some perception. We'll probably go back to them and make sure we have that right. The other thing is that state and local authorities do have the authority on some of our schedules to actually buy directly from us. So in the IT schedule, Schedule 84, the security schedule, and during times of emergency, most of them have the authority, or actually all of them have the authority, at least from our perspective, to buy from us directly, and they do.
All right, and as I promised the first panelist I will pass on their questions to the best of my ability. Mr. Jacobs raised the issue about this Design Excellence Program. I don't know to whom to address this, but tell me your thoughts about the program and whether or not you're exploring the possibility of expanding it.
Well, I don't think you have either of the people here. You should be. That's actually part of the Public Building Service side of GSA.
Thank you.
So that would probably be directed best to them. I understand vaguely what it is, but I'm not competent to comment.
Now, the Brooks Act. You, somebody else? Mr. Kemp?
I can tell you what we do with respect to the Brooks Act.
Now, but you heard what an allegation is not the right word, but you heard what the concern was, which is that in some circumstances that the GSA might not be following the Brooks Act to the letter, and they may be looking at price instead of just qualifications. How would you respond to that?
We have for years highlighted in our training, on our websites, in our direction to contracting officers who use the schedule, that work under the Brooks Act should not be purchased and cannot be purchased under the schedules. It is outside the scope of the schedules. So, and we've done some things in the last years to actually validate and verify that. How do you do that? We have industrial operations analysts, people who actually go out and sit with the contractors and say, "Show me your files. What's going on? What are you selling?" They do some scope reviews. And in particular, they look for this once in a while. We've asked, there's a group called Cupface that we've had discussions with over 13 years, and we've said, if you see violations of this, would you send them to us and we'll follow them act. In fact, one of them sent me one 2 weeks ago, and we're running it down to see, in fact, if it really is or if it's an interpretation issue. We also have addressed this with Public Building Service, our sister service, who actually buys these kinds of things, and we've had their chief architect and others actually go through the files of the task orders that they've written under the schedules to look to see if they feel that they've purchased anything that was really about or relevant under the Brooks Act, and they've come back empty-handed with that. And in fact, one of the individuals who looked at that to me said, I'm surprised at what I found. And what he was saying to me was he was surprised at some of the work that the architectural and engineering firms had done, which he indicated seemed to be an indication of the tough times that they had fallen on, that they were taking work well outside the typical architecture and engineering work, and actually taking work that normally an architectural firm wouldn't be doing if they could get architectural work. It just isn't around.
Before I move on, I suppose if I have a question about the design-build process and possible ways to make that more accessible to small business, that would be for the public building folks as well?
Certainly.
Okay. Mr. Foreman asked a question about additional consideration of the cooperative business model. Talk to me about that for a second.
I believe he's talking about, we've been under discussion with NOPA for quite some time about ways that people who are not, or contractors that are not part of the OS2 could actually be part of the program, much like the other witness had spoken about, where they have a consortium. And there's a way that they could partner a team with the existing vendors. And we're actually working with them on that. I think he alluded to that fact, that we're actually working with them and looking into that. We haven't come to a conclusion yet. We're still in discussions with them.
Go back to the Brooks Act for just a second. If someone like Mr. Jacobs believed that he was prejudiced by a violation of that act, what would be the best steps for him to take?
If he would just send me something, we would look at it and see, in fact, if we felt there wasn't an actual violation, we would work with the agency who had written the order to look at,
Can you do that anonymously? Can you do it anonymously?
Well, one of the ways people have done that in the past, and I'm not necessarily about the Brooks Act violation, but to a hotline complaint to our IG. I've actually even gotten letters in the mail, unsigned, saying, I think this is wrong, this happened. So sometimes it's not even the IG that gets it. We usually follow those up and see, as long as they seem reasonable.
I get unsigned letters in the mail all the time.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Usually very interesting. Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On the Brooks Act point, a couple of areas where the Government Accountability Office might be of assistance to Mr. Jacobs. And one is that we have a bid protest function, so that if any offer or an interested party feels that the process was not followed properly, they have the option to file a bid protest with the Government Accountability Office, and we'll review that. Secondly, we're starting some work at the Departments of Veterans Affairs looking at their construction procurement operation. And, of course, that will involve A&E services. And we can be on the lookout for instances where there might be possible misuse of the schedules.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your participation. I especially appreciate your forthrightness. I think Mrs. Chu and I both try and give the impression that we're not here to beat up anybody. We're actually pulling in the same direction on this. All we're interested in is making sure that small businesses are having every opportunity that we can give them. So I appreciate you doing that. That said, I understand that we're getting ready to vote very shortly on a fairly significant item that we'll need to step out and prepare for. And I have a couple of extra questions, and what I'd like to do is simply send them to you in writing, and if you could get back to us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. We'll be happy to receive those.
Yes.
With that, unless you have anything else, thank you all very much for coming in. Thanks again for everybody for participating. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Good.
Okay. Nice job. Good to see you. Thank you. Yeah. Good to see you again. Yep.